Hey everyone, welcome to the third episode in the series, The Past is Present, New Montagnard Artists. My name is Foon, and today's presentation is a trip to the studio with Ysue, a Montagnard Benang artist who has been working in a studio located at the CANNC campus here in Greensboro, North Carolina. For those of you who are new to our program or may be unfamiliar, CANNC stands for the Creative Aging Network of North Carolina, and it's led by our good friend Leah Miller, the executive director, who has been a valuable partner to the Montagnard Association, and we are very grateful for this partnership and for the space that our artists have to be able to complete their works. This project is made possible by funding provided by Creative Greensboro, the Office of Arts and Culture of the City of Greensboro, through a Catalyzing Creativity grant. Also want to shout out the Montagnard Association and its youth branch, the Montagnard American organization, for applying for the grant, as well as our friend and colleague Andrew Young for leading a lot of the grant writing, who's here on the call as well. I'll invite you all to check out the chat section, which will be updated with links to our Facebook page as well as the author's info. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and start today's presentation by allowing Ysue to introduce himself. So yeah, Ysue, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ysue Bujiang. I was born in Vietnam, came here with my family as refugees, and majored in art in college, Guilford College here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And what else is there to say, really? I'm just trying to make it as an artist, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Ysue, and we'll definitely delve deeper into, there's so much we can ask you, and so don't worry, we're definitely going to get into your life throughout the conversation. So we're going to go ahead and just really go straight into your art by talking about your favorite artwork and why it's your favorite, if you don't mind going ahead and kind of jumping in right there.
Okay, so one of my favorite artworks is by one of my favorite artists, is Caravaggio. And I actually have a piece right here I'm going to pull up. The piece is called The Calling of St. Matthew's, right? And this is it right here. If you guys can see that. It's flipped since it's on the front camera of my phone, but this is one of my favorite paintings. It's the painting I have over my bed, and I'll look at it every morning and every night before I go to bed and wake up and all that sort of stuff. And the reason I like it, well, it really has to do with Caravaggio himself. Kind of his life as an artist really intrigued me. And so this was probably one of the first paintings that I've seen by Caravaggio that I really liked. There were some other ones that were really powerful and really dramatic, but this one, I don't know, just kind of captured my imagination a little bit, and I really loved it because of just the way he controls that light, and like everything on there, you could tell was intentional. And I just like studying it because as an artist myself, I'm kind of trying to going for that Caravaggio style as well.
Can you go deeper into what you mean by Caravaggio style for, maybe us laymen who are not familiar with the art world?
Okay. Caravaggio was one of the first few artists to kind of pull up this painting again so you can kind of understand what I'm explaining here. So he was one of the first to kind of implement this chiaroscuro style, right? So this kind of contrast between the lights and the darks to really create this dramatic, intense scene. And I love that. It's hard to explain, but I love that drama in the painting because a lot of, I don't want to say modern paintings or contemporary paintings, but you just don't really see that in, more in artworks that you see nowadays that's being made. And I mean, there are a select few, I follow a select few on Instagram, and they'll kind of replicate that style too. But Caravaggio was like the OG, the original guy, right? And of course, he's influenced other great artists like Peter Paul Rubens and Rembrandt as well. And so he really has a huge impact in the art world with his, chiaroscuro style. And a lot of his contemporaries actually, um, they actually tried to copy his style as well, even though they hated each other. He had a lot of enemies in his life, and even though they hated Caravaggio, they even though they wouldn't admit it, they thought he was a great artist, and they really wanted to kind of be at that same level. But he was just so far above them.
Mm. Yeah, I'm really happy that we're kind of starting off with this question because I think it gives a good background for the artwork that you're going to show later, your original pieces. And on the flip side of that is, what is your least favorite artwork? And do you have an explanation for why?
I do, and this kind of goes like this is like a personal hatred, right? I took this kind of personally, but it was Duchamp's fictitious urinal, which he signed R. Mutt. I don't remember the year because he submitted it into an art show to kind of criticize the art world because he thought um, they'd got too worried about techniques or optics, and so he submitted this fictitious urinal, which is pretty much ready-made, if you kind of know what that is, to kind of mock the art world with their obsession over techniques and stuff. And I think, in my opinion, this really marked a downfall, I think, in creativity and art. Um, I wish I had the vocabulary to kind of explain this, but my ideas aren't really formed about it. But I think this is kind of the turning point in art where creativity just kind of went into a downward spiral, and because of that historical significance, I really hate it.
Wow. Do you remember that moment when you first learned about this urinal? And can you describe those feelings? Like, was it like an immediate kind of like, was like a very visceral reaction to it, or?
um no, so the first time I came upon it was in a art history class. I don't recall which art history class, but I was looking at it in my textbook, and I was like, what the hell is this? This isn't art. Kind of like the general reaction that regular people would have. They're like, it's just a urinal. How can you call this art? And I didn't know much about the significance about it until years later, where I started studying the art world or art history in my own life instead of kind of the outside of the academic spectrum. Um, but my initial reaction was kind of just like, this isn't art, and I just kind of disregarded it and moved on. I didn't really care too much about what it meant or all that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna switch up the questions just a little bit. Um, so was there a specific event in your life when you realized you had to do art? And was that moment part of you realizing that you wanted to do art, or like changed this this spiraling downfall that you just, explained to us of creativity that you had seen?
Yeah, there was one instant moment. I remember it specifically and very vividly. This was, I think, my sophomore year at Guilford College, and I was in English class. If you've been to Guilford College, you probably know this professor, Jim Hood. I was taking one of his, I think it was a poetry class. I don't recall, but we took this little field trip out to Wake Forest, to this museum, the Reynolda House of American Art or something along those lines, right?
Mhm.
And at the time, I was already majoring in art, but I hadn't taken it seriously. I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna have fun with this and all that. And uh, but on this field trip, one of the artists that they had shown, Frederick Edwin Church of the Hudson River School, you'll see his artwork in books and stuff, and he painted the Niagara Falls painting that's pretty mainstream, I think. But I went to this museum on this class field trip, And I didn't know who he was at the time. I've seen his artwork, but I just didn't connect the names with the artwork, you know. And so I walk in and the first painting I see is like huge painting, is about the size of a desk. I don't remember it, but I do have it posted on my Instagram and my Facebook page. But this was the moment where I knew I had to do art, because I was looking at it, and you know how they say, how people talk about religious moments, and it just kind of something just clicks in their mind, right? This was kind of my moment. I stood in front of his paintings, and for the first time in my life, and I'm not exaggerating here, okay? For the first time in my life, I was perfectly content just to stand there and stare at the painting, right? And at that instant, you know, it's difficult to explain unless you've experienced it yourself. That was kind of my religious moment, but for art, right? I felt connected, kind of to kind of to just like, you know, to the world itself. If you've ever like climbed to the top of a mountain, you know, stood at the peak and looked over the vast landscape, and you kind of have that shock moment, you know, like a little bit of goosebumps, and you're like, whoa. And right then and there, you feel connected to the natural world. This was kind of the same experience. That's probably the closest comparison I can make. But that was my experience right there. And I saw like um, kind of the possibilities that you could create as an artist. And I was like, I want to do this. I've got to do this. And that was right there. That was my calling, because I just stood there like, no joke, just speechless. I couldn't believe it. Like with my own eyes, I was like, holy crap, man. I got to do this. I got to create something like this.
Mm. Wow, that was such a wonderful description. Yes, Harina, the snaps versus Ysue. I felt like you took us to Renolda. I was in Winston-Salem with you in the art gallery. Yeah, thank you for describing so in detail that moment of just pure inspiration. Um, yeah, so following up with that, what do you struggle most with as an artist?
Um, a couple of things. The first thing that comes to mind is probably patience. I'm extremely impatient when it comes to art and some other things in my life. Maybe I'm just an impatient person. Sometimes, sometimes not. I guess it depends on what it is. But with art, I don't know why, but I'm extremely impatient. I just want it to happen. You know, I want the results there right then and now. And so with that, I just struggle because it's not, you can't rush art. It's something you gotta really, you know, kind of dance with almost. That's kind of a weird way of saying it, but I suppose it's a valid description. You kind of have to dance with it, you know, like a slow dance. And I tend to rush it a whole lot. And that just creates a lot of, I guess, instability in the art and kind of in my own mind as well. Cause I'm like, I got to do this. I got to do this now. Why isn't the result showing? I want it now. And that just creates a lot of mess, both on the canvas and in my attitude as well. But I'm getting better at it, but it's still a struggle. I think a lot of artists struggle with that. I guess if you're doing more gestural artwork, I guess I know there are some artists who are very what's that word? Um, no, I don't have it. I guess extravagant or um, you know, a little bit more free in how they do their artwork. So they uh God, I wish I could think of the word, but you know, they'll do it really quickly and stuff, and somehow make it look all cool and stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's it.
You
No,
mean
I'm just,
expressionist?
I guess expressionism does take a little bit of time too. It takes a lot of thinking. Um, I can't really describe it. I'm sorry, but I know there are some folks that can work like that. For me, I think I'm a little too old school for that. And the other thing, um, actually, there might be more than a couple. So patience was my first. The second one, well, I guess my patience kind of ties in with this one as well. As an artist, one of the things I really neglected in my formative years was studying anatomy. And I see that now when I'm doing my own paintings, and and the shortcomings that come along with, skipping the basics and the fundamentals of anatomy. Like when I'm painting a piece, and sometimes the pictures I'll take won't, some of the body parts will be casted shadows and I can't see it. So I gotta have to, you kind of have to use imagination here. And this is where anatomy becomes really handy, is you can kind of draw it from your memory of what you've studied. And I've been able to do that here and there, but that really just takes a huge chunk out of my like mind, like a lot of thinking, because I've only studied anatomy it's very surface level, and I haven't really mastered anatomy, and I can see all my shortcomings on that, and it kind of annoys me.
Mm.
Um, but if I'm gonna give advice to any new artist, I'd say don't skip the boring stuff and just write it out, because you got to do it. It's extremely important. And probably the third thing that I struggle with is, I guess it's no surprise, but as an artist, it's money is a huge thing, like making as an artist is very difficult. You have to be really good to make as an artist. And so you really have to put in the hours. Like I've heard crazy numbers a day, like 6 hours a day. And I'm just like, there ain't no way I'm doing that. I got so many other things to do. And so just thinking about that, I'm like, man, this just seems hopeless. But, still chugging along. Um, I think I still, maybe in the future, like near future, I'll have more time available to spend more on art. But yeah, those are the three main things I struggle with.
Yeah. Well, have you observed strengths that you think you carry, um, that maybe offset or like that you think kind of balance out those ideas of things that you struggle with?
Could you ask that again?
Yeah, I
Uh,
guess I was just wondering whether you also observed, strengths about your art. I know it might be awkward to humbly brag about yourself, but I also want to ask if you also thought about things that you feel particularly come out of your art or that you're proud of.
Man, that's a difficult thing to think about. Uh, Very difficult, because every artwork I've done, I've always criticized it harder than anybody else.
Mm.
And seeing the good in them, I don't know. Um, I think a few times, once I guess while I'm working on it, I'll see every imperfection on there. But later on, um, like when I put the artwork away for a while and I'll come back to it in a few months or maybe even a year, I'll see stuff that I've done on there that I've improved on. I guess that's like the effects of shadows. Shadows and shading used to be one of the things I really struggled with, and there are a few things I did over the summer to kind of maintain that practice, that I look back on. I'm like, hey, I got better at this. And, you could see that kind of progression of getting better and better at doing this one thing that I've struggled with for so long. And I think when it comes to art, I think I've got a lot of intuition on what works and what doesn't. And so I think this is what's helped me along the way. Um, I guess this um, I guess this is something that you're kind of born with, that some people have a higher level of intuition than other people. I think for me, I think it's kind of leaning more towards the higher level. I don't want to, boast or anything, but that's from my own observations. And so when I'm doing art, I I can see what I'm doing wrong, and in the next piece, I'll fix it while I'm fixing it on this one. And while this piece might not be perfect or the way I want it to, I'm learning and I'm fixing it on this piece, even though it'll look kind of ragtag. The next piece, I'll implement that, and it'll get better and better.
Mhm.
And so over the course of this summer, I think I had 3 drawings that I was doing, like serious drawings I set for myself as goals. And I could see that progression from one drawing to the next on how I fix this mistake or that mistake.
Yeah, and I would be interested in looking at your current artwork if you'd be open to sharing and
Uh,
the
are,
progress.
are you talking about the paintings I've done or like past drawings or?
I think the current projects that you're doing on behalf of the past is present.
Okay. Okay. Well, the first painting, if Liana could pull it up, is the fully complete one with a black background with all those people on there. Um,
Yes, let's see. We can
yeah,
just
it's loading right now. Yes, that one. This is the first out of the series. I don't have a title for it yet, but as you can see, I'm implementing that chiaroscuro effect that Caravaggio is well known for, kind of creating that dramatic effect there, where you see those figures on the far right, kind of lit up by the light, and on the far left is very dark. And that's if you look at it on a like in a storytelling perspective, um, the three figures are moving away from that darkness, right, into the light. And on the left, you could see the very far left figure, standing up with this with the weapon in their hands. It's kind of just cast in darkness, kind of that kind of a symbol of the evil that comes with them. And so you'll see that the figure is very dark, and the figure on the bottom being slain is lit up a lot more. And so he's not a bad guy, right? And same thing with everyone else on the right. They're lit up in the light, and you could see their faces very clearly, along with the angel above them, kind of like on their side, leading them in the right direction. And do you want to know? Well, yeah, that's basically the story behind it, honestly. And you can see those two figures on the right. The first one telling everyone else to kind of this is the right direction, right? And he's leading everybody else. And you see the third figure right in the center. He's looking up at the angel, kind of having this religious experience, like that's one thing that's really important in the Montagnard community. This idea of faith and this Christian faith, and so we rely heavily on on our religion to lead us in the right direction. And that's kind of a symbol of that religious moment. And I suspect during our journey from Vietnam as refugees to the refugee camps, I suspect those were that most of the people on that journey had really had a lot of really relied heavily on their faith, to give them hope and to lead them in the right direction, which is exactly what this angel is doing right there.
And can you go over what kind of medium you use for your painting, Sue?
Yeah, I use specifically oil painting, and right now this is just the underpainting, so there's no color on there yet. I plan on adding color once it's all dried up, but I'm using Gamsol as my medium and linseed oil, and I'll be using the linseed oil to add the colors on there. But the Gamsol is sort of just to thin out the paint a little bit and get more coverage on the canvas.
Mm. What colors can we expect to see added to this painting?
A very classical palette. So I've made sure of this before I started the painting to kind of copy the Caravaggio palette. Maybe I'm being a little bit too hardcore on this, but the few that I've managed to get, because some of them I couldn't find because they were custom made by the artist himself. But um, it's a very limited palette, by the way. So I got vermilion hue, which is a red orangey color. Lamp black, you see lamp black on there. It's a very transparent black. That's what you see in the background. And flake white is what you're seeing, the whites on the figures. Flake white is also lead white. It's toxic. I think if you look at Caravaggio's life, some people say that the lead in the paint made him crazy, and that's why he was had such a wild personality. But flake white is a modern alternative to lead white, it's got a strong odor, but I don't think the odor is toxic. Not that I know, but I do know if you consume it, it's pretty toxic. Um, and I got some crap. I don't have them in front of me. I don't remember the names. They got such specific names. Um, Yellow ochre is one of them, and I got a green color. I don't recall the name of that either. And I think that's about and a blue. Yeah, those are the basic colors. I don't want to add too many colors, so because that can get overbearing at times, and so I'd like to keep my palette very simple. So I, uh, well, for one, not to overload the viewer with a huge spectrum of colors, but also to kind of learn how to mix colors myself and um, and kind of calm down the canvas a little bit too. I think that's what artists of the Hudson River School, the landscape painters, taught as well. Is like you want to keep your palette limited to kind of tone things down a little bit and uh, um, keep that harmony, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. What other projects can you give us?
Oh, right. Let me show you the other two pieces. Leanna, if you could pull up the second piece with the two gentlemen standing in front of each other. All right, this is the second piece I'm working on. It's still, um, I'm still working on this one, so it's not finished. But this is also, this would be the second phase of the journey, right? From Vietnam refugees to kind of this turbulent middle phase where the Montagnards are struggling, right, to kind of cement their place in this new world. And so you kind of have, if you look at the painting here, you have two gentlemen doing an exchange. Basically, the gentleman on the left is paying the gentleman on the right, and so if you look at this is kind of that handing off of currency. It's kind of their connection to the material world and um, how you need that you need money to kind of survive and thrive, sort of thing. Even though so that uh, the gentleman on the left, right? But while he's handing it off, it's like, here, you need this to survive, like your physical body to survive, right? But he's also pointing to the heavens. It's basically a reminder, like, even though you need this material thing for your physical body to survive, don't forget your faith, right? Like there's greater power up ahead. Again, this is a reference to the huge amount of faith within the Montagnard community, how um, they rely heavily on their faith to kind of get them through these tough times, because it wasn't easy coming to America, a land you didn't know, and learning the language and learning how to uh, basically assimilate and thrive. And so this is kind of a reference to that, where yeah, you need money, you need material things and all that, but don't forget, don't lose hope, sort of, kind of, because there's greater power, and he's what you really need to be focused on, I suppose. I guess if you're more secular about it, it won't have the same effect, but I consider myself fairly religious, so I think I this is why I really love doing that, these religious references in my paintings. And so the third one, Leanna, if you could pull that out, is just mostly brown canvas there. Yeah. So this is the third piece, the third phase in the journey. This is kind of where assimilation has kind of settled. Now I know you can't really see it in the painting, but the figure on the bottom there she's basically just lying on a mattress, kind of in a relaxed position, and looking up, having a casual conversation with the gentleman on the right. And so this is kind of the idea of uh, where full assimilation into the new world has occurred, and you're comfortable. You consider it your home now. And so this is by showing the figure as relaxed, you're showing kind of the people as having fully settled and having fully understood where they're at, and and their identity. They've cemented their identity in the American new world, basically for them. And what this is, so she'll be lying down on a blanket with Montagnard patterns. Have you ever seen Montagnard fabric? They got it's really it's like black with a lot of reds and greens, and there's a huge contrast on there as well. And so the figure on the right, he'll have the same pattern on there as well. And it would just be a really relaxed piece. And yeah, that's basically it, really. I don't think there's any deeper meaning, not that I can think of.
Well, I mean, I would be curious to hear more about the environment that you grew up in. And, as you're describing a lot of these paintings, you're also reflecting on experiences that you've had, experiences that your family has gone through. Um, so I kind of would like to open the conversation on a more personal level of the environment that you grew up in and what drove you towards art as opposed to other things. We talked about, that moment of inspiration at Renolda, but I think that was, a peak moment and it was a build up. So maybe we could talk a bit about your background and your family if you're comfortable.
Okay, yeah. Well, my memories of the first few years in America are kind of hazy. I was still a baby then, or like not baby, but like a small child, 3 or 4, I think. And we came to America. We lived in this apartment complex. It was kind of raggedy apartment complex. And then we moved to another apartment complex like Glen Haven, where there's more Montagnard community. And that's where I really kind of became more social with the Montagnard community itself. Because before that, I was kind of my only experience with other kids was maybe this family next to us, which were Montagnard as well, but it's very limited. It was that church, because church is a huge thing, but I didn't really pay too much attention at church because I was a kid, I just wanted to go out and play. But so it's church and school. And as a kid, I was at school most of the time. So most of my early childhood was spent with, other American kids and socializing with them. So I didn't really have that same Montagnard connection from an early start. But I do remember like the first memories I had after everything I forgot was in Vietnam. I remember the jungles very clearly, and I was on my mom and dad's back, and I know I was scared, and it was dark, and we were trying to hide from something. I just didn't know what. And I remember my mom setting me down, and I didn't want to be set down because I didn't want to touch the ground because it was full of leeches, right? And that was the first memories I ever had after everything I forgot. And then it was just kind of a blur from there. And then all I remember was being on a plane and then America. Because I don't remember the refugee camps very clearly. I've seen photos. I don't remember any of it. I've tried. My mom's told me stories. They've always told me stories growing up about coming from Vietnam so that I would never forget, which I haven't forgotten. It's just I can't remember, from my own perspective, what happened. But yeah, I went to Jesse Wharton in Greensboro Elementary School, and I think this was first grade was my first experience with art. I was drawing stick figures, and the students next to me, they were drawing stick figures too, but their stick figures were better than mine, and I got annoyed by it, right? And I was like, why isn't my stick figure as good as theirs? Because theirs had clothes on them, and I was like, I don't know how to draw clothes. So from then on, I was like, I want to be better than this guy. So I started practicing drawing clothes on stick figures, and that was kind of my first experience with art. Um, so I went through Jesse Warren. I think around fifth grade, fourth grade, I started drawing pictures for people because I got kind of, attention for drawing well. So I was like, I started drawing anime for people that wanted pictures of anime. And I didn't take it seriously for a long time. It was just a hobby. Middle school at Mendenhall, I drew a little bit as well. Um, what I didn't like about middle school was uh, they made me take this ESL class. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but I didn't like it because it didn't let me take art because I had to fill a slot and I wanted to fill that slot with art. But they were like, oh, no, you got to take ESL. I was like, why? I never understood it because I thought I was doing fairly well in classes. I thought I was fairly proficient in English. I guess not. Maybe it was just because of my laziness, because I did kind of slack off on my schoolwork because I was lazy. I just wanted to play outside. Um, but I, middle school, I kind of took a hiatus from art because I didn't see a future in it. So I was like, nah, I'll just toss that aside, I guess. And then I went to Page High School and I did a little bit of art there too. But growing up, there was never really nobody ever took art seriously. And I never took it seriously as well. Even though people told me at the time, they're like, oh, you're so talented and all that sort of stuff. Nobody was like really supportive um, you know, about going that path as an artist because it wasn't realistic. Nobody thought it was realistic. And my parents were very strict about my education as well. And they were really strict about how I did in school. So they really didn't care about this art hobby that I had. It was more of, do well in school, get a good job, and, live well, basically, that sort of mentality. And it's kind of slowed down as I gotten older. My parents don't really say that much about that anymore because they realize, I'm an adult now. I know how to handle myself and all that sort of stuff. But growing up, I don't know how I didn't just end up doing something else. But I've been really stubborn growing up. As a kid, I was always stubborn. I didn't want to do what other people told me. And so I think it was that idea because I saw the possibilities I had in art, even though they weren't fully realized. I saw the possibilities. And so everybody kept telling me, you can't do art. That's not realistic. And so I went to college doing computer science and I was writing programs for this calculator, like coding. And I was just sitting there writing code for hours and hours just to get this small calculator. And I was like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. This is boring. And so, and at the time, I didn't really care about the degree I got. I just wanted to get college over with. And so I was like, I guess I'll find something I'm good at doing. I was like, I'm good at art. I might as well do that. You know, easy college, 4 years, because I'm good at it. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so it wasn't until, well, like that experience I told you sophomore year, I was still a drawing major at the time. Well, no, I graduated as a drawing major, but I didn't take to painting until senior year, I think. Yeah, it's about senior year. And once I saw the possibilities there, I was like, hey, I could actually do this. Like it gave me that hope. I was like, I could be an artist because I saw what I could do. Like I, I think that long history of me with drawing kind of helped translate into painting very well because drawing is kind of a fundamental in art. You got to be able to draw anatomy, shapes, and all that sort of stuff, understand values. That's how you learn drawing values and all that sort of stuff. So it translated well into painting, and I took well to it. And right now, I've got a full-time job, and I'm trying to paint on the side so I could do it later in the future. So I took this great opportunity that Andrew kind of invited me into, and I was like, hey, this is a good opportunity. Might as well. There's no harm in taking it. If it doesn't work out well, I can still do it on my free time and maybe make it as an artist later in life. But that's kind of how I got into this past is present um, thing because Andrew invited me. I was like, you know, Andrew, I don't think you know this, but I was actually like, I don't think it's gonna work out. I don't know if I want to do this. It seems kind of, I didn't think it would work out basically, but it's actually gotten a lot better. It's going a lot better than I thought it would. Yeah, and
I want to break in at this point too, and hey, I should leave right now because you just gave me all those nice compliments. But on the more serious side, uh, we are entering into a kind of a Q&A period, and we wanted to give everybody a chance to ask you some questions and so on. So I'm going to start off with a question to you. But first, I do want to say it's a real pleasure for me to hear you talk about your work. I really enjoy hearing. I mean, artists oftentimes, depending upon your medium and stuff, you do all your thinking in your medium, and some artists don't tell us anything except it's either on the canvas or it's on the written page or whatever. But you've been very generous in sharing your thought process, what goes on, and so on. And as a young artist, I appreciate from hearing many of you young folks about, I think, the pressures that you all are under, and and your own community and your memories and stuff. I think that's just amazingly powerful stuff. So my question to you is kind of like leaning into that, those memories that you were talking about, and Caravaggio. So Caravaggio, as some of us know, was not only like an amazing artist, amazing painter, Baroque artist, right? Very dramatic and everything. And you were talking about maybe he was off his rocker some, which that's another thing too. But the stuff that really hits me is the way you're connecting that to the Montagnard experience, or as you understand it. And like from what I hear, Montagnard people talking about, it's very violent. It was a very violent past. It wasn't necessarily their making, but it's very violent. And I just want to hear more about, like, is there a connection in your head about the themes that Caravaggio picked, these very extreme moments, the stress and so on that you connect with as you're thinking about the Montagnard experience? Okay, enough of that. I'm going to shut up and then I'll let you go. And I hope there's some other questions out there as well. But I'd love for you to say something about that too.
Okay. I'll try my best here. Um, so you're right. The Montagnard history is very violent. I still recall a lot of the stories my mom and dad tell me about things that happened in Vietnam, and I just couldn't believe it. It's one of those things where you see in movies, but you really wouldn't believe it if no one recorded it at all. And with Caravaggio, I guess there is some violence in his paintings, but why I really like kind of connect Caravaggio with the Montagnard community is even though Caravaggio was painting these, saints, these religious figures, he didn't show them as ideal or superior to everyone else, right? Like in the paintings I just showed you, the calling of Saint Matthew, Saint Peter on the far right is barefoot, and he's dressed in kind of, I guess what you would say, rags, and he's really turning them into a human person, someone that you could relate to, right? Like that you could see yourself in, instead of this idealized figure where it's just that's transcended, human society. So that, I think, that's one of the reasons I like Caravaggio, is because you can sort of relate with the figures, because a lot of his models that he's used are actually just street people. He's used, prostitute people on the streets. He's done street paintings, and that's kind of what made him really controversy during his time too, because that's not something you did back then as an artist. You're supposed to study from, like, these old statues that prior artists use, but he said no to that and just, picked regular people off the street. And I think that's why I like him so much, and why I sort of connect him with the Montagnard community a little bit, because the Montagnard people, they're not this group of elite people. They're just regular people, kind of struggling to survive, struggling to live their everyday lives like everybody else. And I can see that in his work. Any other questions?
I'm gonna invite Sarah.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I do have a question. I'm fascinated by your three-part depiction of the journey, and the way you describe the final panel as the sort of folks are relaxed and they finally settled and finally assimilated into the new American world. And I just have a question. The first one was sort of technical as to who the person on the right-hand side who's sort of leaning over, who that person represents. And then secondly, how do you think there's ever a point where folks can feel fully assimilated into a new society? And I say that, coming from a family of refugees as well. My father came to this country as a refugee from Germany. And, I think his whole life he loved America, but he very much, was of two or three worlds. So I'm just curious about those two questions.
Right. Well, the answer to the first question is about who the figure represents. There's not one specific person. I'll be honest, I haven't thought it through that much. But if throughout the three paintings, there is that same figure on each three paintings, the male figure, and he's in three paintings, and so it'll be that same person. But in terms of like who it represents in, I didn't really think about that. It was just, a person from the Montagnard community, basically just kind of having that social experience in a relaxed setting. The second question about simulation, I don't know if I'm smart enough to answer that, but I'll try. For me personally, I can't speak for other Montagnards because I know they have trouble assimilating as well, and there's this identity crisis that happens with refugees. But for me, in my own experience, I feel fully assimilated because I've come to that point where I've kind of, now this might seem a little bit, I don't know if it's wrong or bad, but I've sort of left my Montagnard identity behind me, and I've adapted a more American identity. And I've never really had a problem with it because, early on, my first few social experiences as a kid was with an American group of kids. And so I never really felt out of place, really. There were a few instances here and there, but overall, I never really had a problem with it. I think that's one of those trade-offs, that you kind of have to do to be part of to kind of feel comfortable in a new setting, is you kind of have to leave that old part of you behind and adapt a new identity. It's like that saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. You think about that, it's like when in America, become an American, be like an American, have those same ideals and interest. And I never really had a problem with that. So I hope that gives you some light, some answer to your question. I know it's not the most sophisticated answer.
No, thanks very much. It's illuminating, and I appreciate your candor.
Yep.
Hi, Ysue, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question for you about your military involvement. Has that affected number one, your sense of assimilating, and also your being an artist, or do you see it as being very separate?
Um, Now this is something I get a lot of surprise reactions from when I tell people I'm an artist, but I'm also in the Marines. You know, they're like, "What? That's not possible. Those are like two different worlds." And I don't know. I've never had any problems with it. It did help me assimilate a lot more, but it also helped me kind of uh, grow up as an adult, you know, and kind of find my place in the social setting, the social hierarchy, I guess you could call it that. Because in the military, you know, you're kind of this, they break you down and they want you to be like everybody else, right? Um, and so you're already part of this big thing, and there's this trust between individuals in the military that you can't find anywhere else. Like, I'll say this now, and no offense to my family, but I actually trust my life to my fellow Marines than I do my own family, and that's the kind of relationship you have when you go in the military, and so that helps a great deal with assimilation because um, you know, you're this individual from a different world than this other guy, but you're connected by a common goal, right? That the military gives you, and so the military community it's small in comparison to, you know, the rest of the American population, but it's also large. And so this I guess this goal that they all have really connects them together. And so I spend a lot of my time with my military friends, and I talk to them the most out of everybody else because I trust them the most. And whether or not that affects my art, I don't know. I think is one thing that the Marine Corps really instilled in me was a sense of pride in our history. And so that's really kind of what pushed me more towards history and art, you know, like the old masters and all that. And so I have a huge appreciation for history a lot more after joining. But with assimilation, it helps a lot. It helped me find my identity, you know, um, in the grand scheme of things.
Say it again.
Thank you.
Yep.
Fun, we've got to wrap up pretty soon. I'm seeing, oh, it's from you. You've got to go soon as well. We're right on time, everyone. It's at 6:30. And Fun, do you mind me doing the wrap up, or are you good with it?
Yes, please.
All right, I'm just going to do it because we're on the 6:30 mark. Listen, I want to thank everyone who was able to come today. I want to especially thank you, Ysue. This is really a super interesting conversation, sharing your thoughts, explaining how artworks come alive, and particularly seeing these works in progress. I think that leaves us all waiting to see what's going to happen next. I'm going to pat myself on the back for giving you this joke. We want to let folks know that this is part of the series. On April 9th from 5:30 to 6:30, we have another event coming up in this series, Past as Present, Writing Our Legacies, Montagnard Short Storytellers and Authors Over Generations. And please join us for this exciting chance to meet and celebrate two generations of writers and authors. I'm very, very excited about this. We have Rena DeTroy in the room still. Give us a wave, please. She is conducting a workshop, and she will be presiding over this event, which will be coming up once again, April 9th. You can find more information on our Facebook page, Past to Present. And without further ado, we wish you a great evening. Good night, everyone, and thanks so much for coming.